All right, for the bell ringer, we're looking at what is the difference between a right and a privilege. The second question is, what is the main purpose of gerrymandering districts? So I want you to think about that for a second, and we will. I want you to respond to the post in the comments, and we will talk about that a little bit later. So once you get past the bell ringer, let's start today. We're going to talk about the Bill of Rights. Now, the First Amendment. This talks about your freedoms. First one being freedom of religion. Now, this does not mean freedom from religion, just means freedom of religion. You're able to practice whatever religion you would like as long as you do not impede on other people's freedoms. With that said, you can go to a public school and you can pray at the school, but the prayer cannot be part of the school. If a group of kids want to pray at the school and I guess a private space, not during class time, they're able to do so. Also, the teacher is allowed to talk about religion if they're not trying to convert you. So if they're giving historical facts about the Quran, about Islam, the history, or if they're talking about Christianity, Judaism, they can do so. But if the moment they try to convert you, they've crossed the line. The moment they make you do a mandatory prayer, they've crossed the line. And there's a lot of case law involving freedom of religion and religion in school. The next one is freedom of speech. Now, freedom of speech is more or less was invented so you can speak out against the king or the queen or the government without being executed. It is not freedom of consequence of what you say. Hate speech is not protected under the Freedom of Speech Act. Lewd, vulgar speech is not protected either. So there are limits to what you can and cannot say, especially in a public format. And even if it's in a private format, those private postings, if someone screenshots, let's say a Facebook post, and puts it on a public format, you can be held accountable. You can lose your job for things of that nature. So freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequence. Freedom of press, again, going back to being able to speak out against the king or queen or the government and getting away with your life. The press, the journalists, the news media outlets should be able to speak out against the government without being retaliated against, without being silenced. So that's part of one of your freedoms, freedom of press. Next, freedom of peaceful assembly. This has to do with your ability to be able to gather, protest, whatever issue you would like, whether it's something that people agree, whether it's controversial or not, is besides the point. You can gather peacefully. The moment it becomes violent, you start breaking store windows, cops get injured. At that point, it violates the law. So it has to be peaceful assembly. Freedom of petition. Petition is just a garnering of support. Can be signatures. Now people do it with certain websites and email addresses. And these different things are used to change laws, to change policies. And it's called a petition. You would get as many people to support you as possible, then take the next step by taking to a mayor, a governor, a senator, things of that nature, to try to see if we can get the law changed. Uncle Sam, we want you to support the Second Amendment. All right, the Second Amendment, very controversial in the United States, means the right to bear arms. Both liberals and conservatives are usually supporters of the Second Amendment. You will find that liberals want more restrictions, but there is no main political party that's against the Second Amendment. And there is no way to take guns from people. Next, it specifies an organized militia in the original letter of the word. However, due to case law, now currently applies to individuals. Gun laws vary from state to state. The requirements for background checks varies from state to state. There are no federal laws saying exactly what the process is to get a gun for each state. So that's why, let's say New York, Chicago has very strict gun laws. Places like Texas, Georgia, not so much. But there are laws, there are requirements. Third, now this has to do with the housing of soldiers. This goes back to the 1700s when the British soldiers would go to colonial towns and have liberty at someone's house. That means they would get to stay for free, eat for free. Sometimes they would violate the person's wife, daughter, or sister. And this was something that made them very hated and distrusted. Now, according to the United States Constitution, housing of soldiers and private housing is not allowed during times of peace. However, if there is a time of war, they could use your housing, but it has to be upon some type of reasonable situation where you're compensated. They're given supplies, they're given food. They just need your house for housing and lodging only, or for strategical purposes. But you should receive some type of compensation. I do not have any case law to go off of because this has not happened or been a thing in the recent history. The Fourth Amendment, probably one of the more complicated ones. The Fourth Amendment has to do with illegal search and seizure. Now, we're talking about their ability to search you, your person, and to seize your assets, your person, your cars, other things that you may own. Now, in order to do so, law enforcement or the government, first, they would need a warrant. Okay, a warrant would be like a signed piece of paper or affidavit from the judge saying that we have probable cause to search you, your residence, your vehicle, or any properties that you own. Warrants take time to get. You will not be able to get issued a warrant on a regular traffic stop. The traffic stop in and of itself has to happen because you broke a law, or they had some type of probable cause that you broke a law. Again, it could take you 6 to 8 hours or a day or a week to get a warrant. Warrants are not easy to come by. The second one is consent. This actually should be first on the list as far as things you can give. That might be one of the first things they ask. Can I search you? Can I search your vehicle? And if they do not have a warrant, you actually can say no. You cannot search my vehicle. Be nice about it. Don't be, mean or rude, because you do not want to upset a person that has a gun. Next one, plain view, probable cause. Now, as a police officer, if I walk up on a vehicle and I look through the window and I see a bag of cocaine and what I deem to be a firearm in a non-carrying state, I can ask them to get out the car. I can check. And let's say I find out that that's not really cocaine. It's actually baby powder. And that gun was a play gun. But I do find a bag of, let's say, heroin inside the vehicle. I can still charge them because I have plain view. I have probable cause to search the vehicle. Now, anything I find within that vehicle can be used against them. Exigent circumstances. These are emergencies. If your house is on fire, I can kick in the door and go in and save you. I can try to put out the fire because now it's a hazard to the community. While doing that, if I find something, some type of contraband, you can be held to the letter of the law. You can be charged with that contraband. The Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment has more to do with your right to having a grand jury. These are 12 people that are responsible for determining your charges, if it's going to trial. I'm not sure if they're there during the plea bargain, but we'll talk about plea bargains a little bit later. The next one is double jeopardy. That means you can't be charged for the commission of the same crime twice. How does this function? Well, I'll tell you. If you commit murder, let's say you commit murder, and you go on trial, you get a really good lawyer, and they determine that you're innocent. All right? They do not say that you're guilty. You actually, after committing said murder, admit to guilt, and that is not enough evidence to reopen the trial. They can't charge you with that same crime. And that would be called double jeopardy if they try to. Self-incrimination. This is along the lines where you do not have to tell on yourself. You get stopped by the police. One of the few things you're required to tell them is your name, your date of birth, and that's so they can check you to see if you're in the system. After that, it goes with what we call self-incrimination. If they ask you any questions about the commission of a crime, you can ask for your lawyer. If they ask you again, you can say, I plead the fifth. If they ask you again, LAWYER, lawyer. I want my lawyer. And you do not have to answer any questions because you do not have to self-incriminate yourself. People will say, well, won't I look guilty? Yes, you could look guilty, but it's better to look guilty than to actually be guilty. Next, due process. This is simple, saying that if you get arrested, we need to be able to tell you what your charges are, get you to the station, fingerprint you, take your photo, and put you in the system as soon as possible. So if people want to bail you out, they can. And then you should go to trial as soon as possible as well. But part of the due process is, what are your charges? Okay. And then we want to make sure you're in the system. So when people come about, it's not like you're just lost in thin air. All right, this one's a little complicated. Private property takings clause. This has more to do with if you own private property on land that the government wants to use, they can't just take it away from you for public domain. They can't just say, oh, we're just going to take it. Now, based on case law that I've seen, and I can talk a little bit more about that later, if they